Welcome into the latest edition of ESPN FC. We're live here on ESPN Plus. I'm Dan Thomas, joined by Ali Moreno, Shaka, Hislop and Craig Burley. Yesterday lacked a little drama. Today certainly made up for that. Certainly in the so-called Group of Death. What a couple of games we saw take place concurrently. Just a reminder, this is how things stood going into kickoff. Borussia Dortmund were through. It was all about whether or not they finished top of the group. A victory for PSG would mean there'd be no chance for Newcastle or AC Milan. However, if PSG drew and Newcastle won, they would go through to the knockout stages. And if AC Milan beat Newcastle and PSG lost, then it would be the Italian side through as second place. Well, in the end, it is Borussia Dortmund who are advancing. We knew that already, but we now know that they will go top of the table. PSG second. AC Milan will be in the Europa League draw. Newcastle then are out of Europe altogether. Frank Leboeuf joins us, but no time. That's the end of today's show. That highlight
Fantastic. I told you keep it quick today.
extra time is
Thank you.
Wow.
Well, it's saying something when Dortmund are the most consistent team in the group.
Wasn't it brilliant, though? Just watching both of those games, all of the permutations coming true throughout the 90 minutes. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think, you know, obviously Dortmund knew they were already qualified. But for Paris Saint-Germain, yeah, they missed chances, but they are not convincing. AC Milan were poor for 45 minutes an hour. You couldn't ask much more from Newcastle in terms of what they gave. The criticism I would have is they had the Europa League still in their hands, worst case scenario. So they didn't have to go hell for leather like they did. It was end to end, but they just left themselves too open, searching for that final Champions League place. And it cost them a place in Europe altogether. And I think that was naivety. That's been hypocritical because they gave... We know the situation there. We know the injuries. We know the youngsters that are having to play. And they couldn't do a lot more in terms of the performance. But in terms of managing the game at the end, I think we saw the naivety and the inexperience of just leaving themselves way too open. And it means they don't get in the Europa League. And listen, maybe Eddie Howe's OK with that. I don't know. Maybe he's fine with it. Maybe it was Champions League or nothing for them. But it was, I think, to not have any European football after waiting so long is going to be a disappointment.
Mayor of Newcastle, what's your gut reaction after this?
Disappointing. On a number of levels. One, you go back to the game in Paris and that call later on, and you just wonder how that would have changed things. Certainly changed Newcastle's approach, to Craig's point. But then, yes, in this game, okay, that decision was made. You know what you have in front of you, and you have to deal with it. I thought Newcastle started to fade a little bit early on in the second half, and then the second goal came. I mentioned in the highlight. Shaka goes on an overlap, and nobody covers. And you could kind of see it from the time Newcastle lost possession that nobody was in cover, and Newcastle were just stretched. In a game that, yes, you want to win, but to Craig's point, you also don't want to take those chances to lose and find yourself out of it completely. From there, I thought a foul could have been committed. Again, some naivety, maybe a lack of experience by Guimaraes and Isaac, who was running on empty, even though he just came off the bench. I could have put a stop to that. But again, these are lessons you learn in the competition that, you know, are invaluable, but they're costly at this point.
What's your takeaway, Ali? What we saw?
Well, in regards to Newcastle, it's amazing how, for everything that they've done, it comes down to moments. And in this game in particular, two moments I think stick out for me. The early chance for Miguel Almiron, where Joelinton gets into the box, puts the ball across the goal, and now it's a tap-in. And Miguel Almiron allows that ball to come all the way across to his left leg because that's where he feels most comfortable. And then that allows Tomori to come across and makes the challenge. If he just puts his left foot out, his left leg out, and he just taps it in with his right foot, if Tomori makes a challenge, he's going through Almiron. It's a penalty either way. Big moment that. But then in the second half, an even bigger moment, and it's a save by Mike Maignan. Yeah. Because at that point, it's still 1-1. That ball goes in, and it changes the feeling for everybody, for Newcastle, of course, Newcastle fans, that stadium, and all those legs that were heavy at the time. Now, all of a sudden, you have life because you see that you can finish this out. Maignan makes that save, and he changes really the momentum of the game, and it's almost felt like Newcastle is kind of like, I don't know that this is going to happen. Milan gets a push from that, and then they go on to score the game winner themselves. That, I think, it's amazing that Newcastle have gone through all these games and all this emotion, and yet it comes down to really two deciding moments for me.
And PSG just about scraped themselves over the finish line, Frank.
Yeah, but you know what? They showed what they showed for the 6 games that they played, that they have so much weaknesses, and I will sum up that to the all teams in that group, where it was the last day was very interesting, and those 2 games were very interesting because of the weaknesses that the 4 teams showed, and that's what it is for PSG as well. Talented at some point, you can see some chances that they had, how they covered the ball, how they kept the ball. That was very interesting. How they created chances, but you can feel that defensively they're very weak. In the middle of the park, they, for me, too much inexperience and not strong enough. And at front, they waste chances.
Yeah.
And that overall, you know, you can win the Champions League if you have too much weaknesses and you don't have anywhere simply strength. That they don't have, and that's annoys me and worrying me for the future, because for sure Paris Saint-Germain won't go far.
Tells you how bad these group stages are when that group's the group of death.
What do you mean?
What should have been the group of mediocrity, really. There's not one of these clubs are going to win the Champions League.
No, but I think when you saw the draw made and the names within them...
Yeah, I don't go on names. Aston Villa are not in it, are they?
What are you talking about?
Well, what do you mean names? They're none are going to win it.
No, when you looked at all the groups, you thought, oh, this is going to be the most interesting, and it was the most interesting.
Even.
Yeah.
Most even.
Exactly my point, the group of mediocrity.
I don't think you can call it that.
Well, who's going to win the Champions League out of this group?
But that doesn't necessarily mean you've got tournament winners.
Well, it just means you've got
an even group.
Yeah, right, okay, you've got 4 mediocre teams in European standard in this group.
Yeah, but it's interesting because of their names and because of the size of the stadium.
We've agreed on that.
I don't know why you had to go there.
Well, I'm looking at it and going, you know, Dortmund, it's been good for them. They're absolutely mince in Germany at the moment. PSG, not entertaining anybody. Still a bit of a circus. Yeah, the group was tight. I think it'd been Porto, Atletico Madrid.
Yep.
You know, RB Leipzig and something else where we are sat and going, oh, that's a...
No, because the name's associated.
Ah, it's all about names, isn't it?
I don't know why.
The group... every time somebody's called this a group of death, I'm like, oh, my God, shut up. Stop it.
Shaka, does the fact that Newcastle finished bottom in the group of death, does that give Eddie Howe some solace?
No. I think...
Solace.
Yeah.
Finishing bottom.
Well, finishing bottom is a comparison to, say, the Manchester United group yesterday, in which we were critical because it contained the likes of Copenhagen, who are no European giants, and Galatasaray. So the fact you finished bottom, do they deserve the same sort of criticism that Manchester United got yesterday?
I think overall this was a tougher group just for starters, and I think this group kind of came down to a couple of key moments. That refereeing call in the previous leg, as I mentioned. The refereeing call in Dortmund PSG today with Marquinhos not being sent off. And then big moments that in last game that Ali just spoke about. And also just coming into this, Newcastle's continued injury crisis. So I think the fact that Newcastle in their first season back in Europe for 10 years, 10, 15, 14 years, something of the sort, put up this kind of a fist, I think resonates well with Eddie Howe. And though they finished bottom of the group, at one point during the day, they were going through to the group stage.
Yeah, but it's going to be a bun fight for them in the Premier League, isn't it? Because, you know, Villa are in there, Tottenham are in there. Who else knows what's going to happen with Man United? And they're all playing for fourth, pretty much, I would imagine. And that Europa League has been an avenue recently to the Champions League, isn't it? So in some sense, they've shot themselves in the foot. Yeah, great effort, Newcastle, but they can look back to their performance in Milan, which wasn't great. Their performance at St James's Park against Dortmund was very poor. And then, obviously, the big decision in Paris, which ultimately has knocked them out here. But I just felt at the end, they could have been... It was just... hell for leather. Yeah, Shar went that run. It was just too open.
The game should have been handled a whole lot differently. But this is a part of the process for me. given that Newcastle haven't played in Europe for so long, you have these stumbles, you learn from them, you now have a better idea of what your squad needs to look like in terms of competing in the Premier League and Europe, how you manage that, how you manage rotations, and for the players that experiences, how you manage games. From here, now you build on this experience. Now, the question is, of course, will Newcastle finish top 4 and are able to build on the?
Well, they'll be in Europe next year.
But
you know, in some sense.
So it's a step forward, and I don't you know, it's disappointing, but you don't look back on it with a whole lot of negativity.
One last thing on Newcastle, and I would just say it's hard for a team that depends on the emotion that St. James's Park give you to not push forward. So how do you manage the game late and say, hey, look, we're not going to throw it out the window because we're thinking about potentially Europa League, when that same energy is what gets you going. And it's difficult. You're on the field, you're trying to make decisions, you think you have to win the game. It's a natural instinct of the group to say, let's go get it. Let's get after it. And I know that perhaps that comes with experience, but it's the same emotion that carries you, that same emotion is the one that hurts you. And it's difficult to manage that as a player on the field.
Go on, Frank.
Yeah, I go with that, and I understand what Ali says, and I agree with him. But yeah, it's what we call experience, and being an experience pushes you to the extreme and sometimes to the wrong side. I think at the end of the game, they wanted to go maybe for a win where you should have maybe go back, and because for one reason they were completely tired in the middle of the park. Bruno Guimaraes, he couldn't run anymore, and instead of maybe staying in front of his two centre backs, he tried to go forward. And you have to have a little bit of experience. It's what killed Newcastle today or the other games. And it's why they finished bottom. It's because they have the biggest weakness in football, the inexperience. And when you don't have players who have been through many campaigns of Champions League, they know what to do. We can see Mbappe being very unhappy with the fact that Paris Saint-Germain didn't want to go for a win, where because of the rest of the team, like Marquinhos, Hakimi said, no, we stay, we keep the draw, and we make sure we go through. That's the difference. And sometimes somebody has to speak out to make sure that the team follows, and they all go to the same path, and maybe they avoid making silly mistakes, I would say.
Some of these countries are getting, and not England, probably now, because of Man United and Newcastle, coefficient.
Yes.
Some of these countries are getting 5 teams in. Deary me.
Well, one country will win.
Is it one country?
I think it's only one country,
Deary
I believe.
me. Holy smokes. 5 teams to qualify for the Europa League out of country.
Ah, there we are. Thank
Sorry
you.
about that.
Thank you
Just
for that.
thinking.
Frank, can PSG get any better?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think the president, the chairman, Mr. El Khalifi, said yes, it's going to get better and better. I don't see. They try to compare the seasons, and they say, well, for the first time, we feel that we have a squad, we have a team, they want to play together. Well, I don't really see the difference. I saw arguments between Hakimi and Mbappe the last 10 minutes. I don't see the power that we used to see. Even if it was, like Craig said, a circus, you could feel that they had something, and they went through and they went to a final one year. I don't see that coming. It's too, even if you have talent like Zaire Emery in the second half was a master of perfection. But he's on his own. Ugarte and the others are not strong enough to cope with other teams that we know are better than Paris Saint-Germain. And at the back, my God, I saw even Marquinhos seems to have lost something from his past, and I don't recognize any of them. And at front, I'm sorry, except Mbappe, who can be a killer, Barcola and Kolo Muani today, I mean, it was like they would never score. So that's impossible to get better when you have so much weaknesses.
I would also say about PSG and Mbappe in particular, and Frank just mentioned that, I think we've come to expect that Mbappe defensively is not going to give you anything, and apparently we've all accepted that. But today, I don't understand, and this goes specific to today. I don't understand if he's watched Mats Hummels try to run and chase Luis Openda over the weekend against Leipzig, in which, come on, legs, come on, legs. And then even today, anytime that Mbappe or Kolo Muani played not necessarily even off the shoulder of the center back, but just a couple yards away from the center back and just run through, they're not going to stay with you. So for the life of me, I can't figure out why Mbappe is trying to play sort of like a number 10 and kind of in between the lines. And if one of your major strengths as a player is your speed, and one of the major obvious weaknesses of the opposing back line is their lack of speed, why don't you exploit that time and time again? Stop trying to prove to everybody that you're a playmaker.
Right.
No. Your speed right now is what can make the difference. So use it. We know you're a great player. We know you're one of a kind talent. Why this playmaking? Get in behind and utilize that speed and be successful, efficient, and effective for your team.
I think Ali, you exactly explained what he feels. He feels that he can do better. He feels that he can express to the world how talented he is. Where he's, as you say, he's mistaken. I remember talking to Thierry Henry. When I say, why Thierry, why do you try to come back in the middle and try to play as a number 10, where you have to run 3 times during the game and you're going to kill everybody because you're too fast and you're going to score 3 goals? He said, well, I might be bored. That you have the explanation why Mbappe comes back as a number 10.
There we go. Do you have that problem on the pitch?
What's that?
You're bored.
Oh, yeah.